Hi, my name is Janet Tarjan Earl from Tarjan Studio. I'm going to show you in this tutorial on how to stretch watercolor paper. I use an Arches 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. It's a good durable paper for stretching, and the edges don't rip or tear. As you will find if you try some papers, the edges may tear as you're trying to pull. And if you do run into that problem, just switch to an Arches paper. The substrate that I staple the paper into is either a soft plywood or a soft drawing board. Whatever you choose, you want to make sure that the board that you're stapling into is soft so that the staples will actually go into the board rather than being deflected onto the top surface. If you like this video and you find it useful, I would appreciate if you could give me a thumbs up, hit the bell icon to be notified of new art video how-to tutorials, and subscribe. And so let's get started. To start with, you'll need a few essential tools like a stapler that opens out completely because you're going to need it to be able to go flat. And I put the staples in from the top. This is the type of stapler I prefer. You will need a screwdriver with a very thin head. A regular screwdriver will probably be a little too thick. I use wire cutters in case I have to pull a staple out that gets broken, and regular pliers for pulling staples out. The staples that I use are a very hard and durable staple. Regular staples tend to be just a little bit too soft, so look for a hard staple. Garbage can, you'll have to throw extra staplers in there. I use a wallpaper water tray for soaking. Now the paper itself, the edge, the black edges are gummed, and you'll see that you can then separate out the paper. So that is where you're going to insert your knife. Keep the blade so that the tip is pointed towards you. If you point the tip the other direction, away from you, you'll have a tendency to actually cut the paper, and you may end up cutting sometimes 1/4 of an inch off. So it seems to work best if the paper is being cut by the angle at the blade at this angle. So you'll end up cutting all of the edges, so you're removing the paper from the board. Now this is a supposedly pre-stretched block. I just happen to have a lot of these. If you have just straight paper and it's not attached, you don't have to, you can avoid that whole process. I then go through, because that black gummy stuff can not all be removed, so I'll try my best to remove it with fingers and just a little bit, running that blade slightly over the edge just to get that extra material off, and clean your board off. Because if you don't, those pieces somehow manage to get onto your paper. Then you're going to take the paper and you're going to put it in the tray. It takes a few minutes for the paper to soak enough, so what you're going to try to do is get it to roll. So as it's getting wet and softening a little bit, and then you can start rolling it so that all of the paper is submerged in the water. I'll give it a few times where I'm rolling it so that all of the water covers all of the paper, and then after a few minutes it should be soft enough. Then you can pull it out. You'll notice that it is not nearly as stiff as it was, but you don't want it to be too soft, so don't leave it in for 10-20 minutes. That'll probably be too soft, and the paper will then rip and tear as you're trying to staple it. So removing some of those little pieces and edges again, and then I center it on the board. And once it's been centered, I'm ready to start doing the stretching. So you're taking your staple, and in the middle of the longest side, I put a staple in the middle, about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. And then I'm going to take that paper and pull it off to the one side, in this case the left. I'm pulling hard. I have about a 1/2 inch spacing between, and then I do it onto the right side. I'm pulling hard to the right side, pressing down, putting in a staple. So I have 3 staples on that side. I then turn the board around, and I'm going to do the same thing to the opposite side, but I'm going to be pulling up that paper and pulling it hard And as you could see, maybe you saw a little bit of change as that paper is being pulled up. It actually creates a little bit of a buckle. You press in the middle. Now this time I'm not only pulling towards me hard, but I'm also then pulling out to the side. And this is important. And the rest of all the paper will be stretched like that. Pull towards me, pull out to the side, holding with the finger really hard, put the staple down, and then press. As you're pushing that staple onto there, now you see where that buckle is? Now you're going to pull that paper so that buckle comes out. You're pulling towards yourself, put a staple in the middle, pull again towards yourself, and then out to the side, pull hard, hold tight with your fingers, press hard with your stapler, press down. Pull towards yourself on the other side, pull outward, hold the fingers tight, press with the staple tight, press and put your staples in. Again, now repeat it, go to the other side, and you're going to again pull really. You have a good full and firm pull. Put your staple in the middle, pull towards you, pull off to the side, hold tight, put your staple in, and then again on the opposite side, you're going to pull towards you, pull out to the side, hold tight, put your stapler down, press. And then from that point you're going to be doing this. Now I'm adding a little bit of water, so as I start to see the glisten of the paper begin to diminish, it means that the paper is starting to dry, so I just pour a little bit of water to keep that paper nice glistening wet. And then I'm doing the same thing, so as I'm now on the long side, I might do 2 staples either side, turn the paper to the opposite, do 2 staples each side, and then I go to the short side, and because it's shorter I'll only do 1 on either side, flip it around, do 1 on either side, flip it around. And then once I've gotten to that point where I'm getting to say within 3 to 4 inches of the edge, again wetting the paper here, keep that glisten, and at this point I'm getting ready to go ahead and finish off the corners. So you're pretty much just following the same procedure all the way out to the very edges. If you saw there a moment ago, I had a staple that did not go in, so I used the little, here again, I'm doing this again, using the screwdriver to get inside the staple. Always make sure that you are going towards the outer edge when you're using a staple, a screwdriver to pull up. Now the reason I'm doing this is that the very first edge that you stretch will always buckle, because as you're stretching the rest of the paper, that very beginning one will always buckle. You're pulling the staples out, you're pulling the paper towards you, and then you're going ahead and tightening that paper up. And if there are any other buckles that occurs where, as I'm stretching, especially the bigger the sheet of paper, you'll end up with more buckles. So you're refining your edges and pulling that paper out. So the one advantage of stretching is that as you're working very wet with watercolor, you're not getting big buckles in your paper. I have found that even though the blocks are supposedly supposed to prevent that, I have never found them to do that unless it is a very, very small size block, like say an 8 by 10. When you start getting into 12 by 16s or 16 by 20s or 18 by 24s, once that paper gets good and wet and you're doing a wet and wet wash, you still get buckles. So this is the only way to avoid those buckles. And here again, I'm wetting that paper as it looks like it's drying out a little bit. I'm looking at the paper from different angles with the light so that I can see if there's any buckles I'm not noticing. A last note is that when you're removing your paper after you've finished your painting and you're removing it from the board, make sure that you are doing the screwdriver as I showed you earlier, where it is always pointed outward rather than inward to the paper. Otherwise you might mess up your paper. So if you enjoyed this, then I hope you'll give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. I'd appreciate it. Thanks.